Hello, sweet friends. Welcome back to The Productive Homemaker. Here in my little corner of YouTube, I like to talk about frugal and intentional living. I hope you'll come hang out with me as I cook supper tonight. It's been about 2 weeks since we spoke last, and how I've missed all of you so much. Your warm encouragements and beautiful stories are something I've grown quite fond of. After Christmas, my family fell ill with the flu, and it took its sweet time in leaving us. Finally, though, we are back to better health and our normal shenanigans. How a tough illness will make one thankful to hear children running and squealing again. Tonight is a special dinner for our family. I am making a mushroom braised rabbit with mashed potatoes. It's a simple meal, but it's jam-packed with flavor. A part of my family's life is that we raise a portion of our meats here at home. It's not all of it, but it is some. In our backyard, you'll find a pair of pigs growing out, a flock of chickens, and rabbit hutches. The pigs who will be butchered in February will provide us with meat and lard. Our chickens give us eggs and meat, and our rabbits give us meat also. It's not everyone's cup of tea, I understand, but we take great pride in raising our animals, teaching our children about the life cycle and respecting the creatures that sustain us. It's a part of our life's rhythm. We're going to start by cooking those diced onions up, cooking them until they're translucent and very soft. And we'll add in our mushrooms also. I feel like any homemade dish tends to start with onions and garlic, or at least that's how it happens in my kitchen. Mushrooms are a favorite around here. All of my children love them, and my husband and I love them too. I'm going to use a mixture of these basic baby bell mushrooms that I buy at the store. And along with those, we're also going to be using a jar of dried wild chanterelles that my husband and children picked last August for us. It may be silly, but this brings me so much joy to incorporate our forest foraging treasures into our meals. A favorite pastime is to go tromping through the forest, looking at all the little treasures that can be found. And something we found that we all enjoy is going out to look for foragings. Now, we live in Appalachia, so there is quite an abundance of things that you can find in the wild. We have mushrooms, ginseng, a fruit tree called the pawpaw, as well as various nuts and such. Now, the only thing that we've really foraged for so far since living here has been the wild blackberries that grow along the back of our yard and just about a half a mile down the road, and these chanterelles. It is just something so fulfilling to go out where nobody else has touched, to pick a few things to bring home, secret little treasures that only us and the squirrels get to know about. We'll let those guys soak while we finish cutting up the mushrooms and prepping. The meat in this dish is special to us. This was a rabbit in particular that all of us were very fond of. She was our first when we moved here 2 years ago. Our rabbit, along with the baby chicks, was the start of us learning to grow our own food when we transplanted from suburban areas to the rural Appalachia Mountains. She's been with us for 2 years, and she's given us many beautiful babies. But her time of breeding had come to a close, and we couldn't bear the thought of allowing her to go to waste, seeing as she had given us so much. So tonight, we honored her through this supper. Unless you are raising rabbits for your own consumption here in the United States, it is not something that many families eat on a regular basis. But rabbit is surprisingly very good. I had never tasted it before we started raising it ourselves. And it tastes a lot like chicken, and it dresses very similarly to a chicken. So while this is unusual for my fellow Americans, I do know that there are others in other countries that also enjoy rabbit. Now, I'm not one that typically gets attached to animals very easily, but she was special. There were tears and prayers of gratitude for all that she gave to us here in our home. And with that respect, we will make sure that her life was not wasted. If anything, she shows us what a precious gift life is. To some, this is a person's worst nightmare, having to break down meat in order to feed our families. But for me, this has been a lifelong goal and dream ever since getting married, and especially since becoming a mother. Being able to forage and raise food. These are things that I've longed to be able to do ever since we started off living in our tiny little apartments. These things bring consistency and contentment to our lives. And foraging and butchering animals reminds me that there is a season for each thing to happen every year, and we must wait patiently for that time to come. Strawberries are only in season once a year, just like the pawpaws are only ripe once a year. And Mother Nature, well, she rushes for no one. Now that our onions are cooked down, we'll start to add in our mushrooms so that way we can cook all of the water out of them. I try to remove as much water as possible so that way they pack their biggest punch within the broth. There is something so valuable that comes with learning to be content while waiting for the next thing. I'm always finding new areas in my life to practice this skill. For the first 7 years of marriage, we bounced from apartment to apartment, never having the opportunity to garden other than with a few pots or a small garden bed. Looking at my potted tomatoes against the backdrop of rushing traffic, my heart would just ache, longing for the quietness of our own little home and land. Now that all of my mushrooms are cooked down, I'll add in a small glass of white wine. And what that does is it just helps lift up all of the little brown bits out of the bottom of my pot. That's where all of your flavor hides. And we'll add in our chicken broth and then our bits of rabbit to put in the oven to slowly cook for a couple of hours until it's nice and tender. My husband and I chose a harder path than most by not taking out debt. So I was forced to accept our tiny living in the city, and eventually I learned to joyfully accept our little apartment homes and turn them into my own classroom as I waited for my greener pastures. I learned to cook, bake, preserve, sew, and to be disciplined with what we did have. And you'd think that I'd never want for more after we bought our little cottage in rural Appalachia. I mean, after all, we have the house, the little yard, living in the county with neighbors who are close but not too close. But, you see, the heart is never quite fulfilled and is very good at making one feel bad even when there are blessings abounding. These chanterelles plumped up so nicely, and instead of taking the time to cut them up, I just shredded them with my fingers. Seeing as we all enjoy mushrooms in our house, we don't mind having a little bite of them. They add such a nice pretty orange color in with the dark brown mushrooms. Now, I forgot to get footage, but I did take the time to coat the meat in salt, pepper, and thyme, just to give it a little bit of flavor. Though, with the mushrooms and onions in the bottom, the meat doesn't really need much, as the gravy and mushrooms will really shine through here. We're going to add them into the pot and simply cover it with a little bit more thyme and then some chicken stock, so that way everything is covered with liquid to cook nice and slow in the oven for a few hours. It doesn't do any good to live in a pity party and wishing for bigger and better things, when we could instead stop to smell the roses, so to speak, where we are. My first home gave me the ability to live mortgage-free with my family. Our little yard has provided a classroom for our entire family to learn about animals and gardening. Each little room in our cottage bursts with love and laughter. Though small, always seems to fit us just right. It's not bad to strive for better things. I know that I personally dream of more land one day, and a home with huge windows that flood us with sunlight each day. And maybe, just maybe, in the future I can have that. If not, though, it'll be okay. Because we've found joy and contentment with right where we are, and also with where we have been. Besides, the flowers always grow beautifully, whether in a pot or a row, as long as one intentionally cares for them. This meal cooked beautifully. The meat was so tender it was falling off the bone. To finish off my gravy, I'm adding in some sour cream to lighten the mushroom flavor, and then just a small slurry of cornstarch to thicken it. It was so flavorful, I could not believe it, and I was so happy with the way it turned out. Plating up supper, looking at the beautiful mashed potatoes that my 8-year-old helped me make, I want to say thank you to all of you for being here with me tonight as I cooked supper. And thank you for being here and helping me honor our sweet rabbit that gave so much of her life to us. We are blessed that we got to be her stewards, and we are so grateful for everything that she taught us. I hope your weekend and your week is beautiful and lovely, and we will talk again very soon, my friends.